There's something for every imagination at your local comic shop. Visit comicshoplocator.com to find a store near you.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Dan Wickline Show. I am your host, Don Johnson, and I have a collection of slightly used pastel t-shirts available on eBay if anybody's interested under the username King Crockett 85. Take a look for them. There's a nice collection out there. All right, everybody. As you could tell by the spoiler warning that jumped a little early, tonight is our Loki spoiler conversation. You guys are all welcome into the conversation, your thoughts, your feelings about the finale, the entirety of the 6-episode series, the fact that we know there's going to be a second season, and just what the effect of the show is going to have on the MCU proper. 1 second. Okay, there we go. Now, as we get started, like I said, you guys are welcome to jump in. I know Kyle is probably going to pop in because he's still trying to figure it all out. It looks like my handle now has changed to I Hate Tubbs 85. All right. He's carrying the joke forward for me. By the way, I also want to bring up that this is the last new show of the Dan Wickline Show this week, and I was promised upon my return from vacation that this week I would get a new show opening, and I haven't gotten a new show opening. Just an observation.
I'm handicapped, okay? I'm handicapped.
Yeah, but you were that way when you promised to get me the new opening.
Yeah, but then I watched the new Loki show, the new Loki episode, and, like, my brain is still recovering. Like, I've been waiting for this episode of your show for 2 whole days because it's the only thing that's going to fix what's happening in here, okay?
Oh, boy. If you're counting on me to fix that, that's going to be a problem.
Hey, I came up with a Crockett and Tubbs joke. That's about as much as you can expect from me this week.
All right. For those of you who don't know, Kyle is recovering from surgery. I believe he had a large hand removed out of his ass. But, it was, I'm sorry, it was bone spurs. It was bone spurs. So, anyway, let's get rolling on the show. Now, one of the big things that have come out news-wise has to do with Tom Hiddleston, and Hollywood Reporter is reporting, which is pretty good for a Hollywood reporter, that Hiddleston will be appearing in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. Now, it's pretty obvious that that is the movie that's going to be directly affected by what just happened in Loki, as well as Spider-Man No Way Home, which we already know will have Alfred Molina playing Doc Ock from the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movies, and Jamie Foxx reprising the role of Electro from the Andrew Garfield movies. So something had to happen to create a multiverse, because WandaVision didn't do it like everybody thought it was going to. So we had to end up with a multiverse, and we got one. Now, there's a lot of weird stuff that happened in this episode. In the beginning, when this show started, I had equated it to being 48 Hours meets Doctor Who, and someone trumped me by referring to it as White Collar meets Doctor Who, and very much I thought that was a perfect analogy. But now what we're seeing at the ending here, it's Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. It's Willy Wonka. It's Willy Wonka and Doctor Who mixed together. because Loki is Grandpa and Sylvie is Charlie. That's kind of what I'm seeing now, because if you've watched the episode and you didn't have a heart attack during the Miss Minutes jump scare, sweet Jesus, that was a jump scare. My God. Wes Craven hasn't pulled off a jump scare that good. But, all right. So, sure, it's easy to recap the episode because not a lot happened. A lot of exposition happened. But basically, Sylvie and Loki, they get to the Citadel at the end of the time. They're met by Miss Minutes. She walks them in. We see that there were 4 Timekeeper statues. One of them was destroyed. The other 3 were still standing. I'm assuming there's a story behind that, and we haven't gotten it yet. There is reference to that in the comics, where He Who Remained banished the 4th Timekeeper. But what that's going to be in the MCU still remains to be seen. Now, Miss Minutes does the devil's advocate thing and offers them all they could wish for. She offers Loki to win against the Avengers, to kill Thanos, to get his own Infinity Gauntlet. And she offers Sylvie happy memories, a good life, which very different. To show how different these characters are and what they've been through, you just have to look at what they were offered. So literally, Loki was offered all the things that he had, basically been evil for, his machinations were pushing towards, while Sylvie was just offered to have a happy life, which really comes down to her motivations. And that's important in the end. But I'm fairly sure they knew, they obviously knew this wasn't going to work. So I'm not sure why they went ahead and made the temptations. Maybe it was like a final test. But He Who Remains was already working from a script. And there's a question of who gave him the script, but we'll get to that in a minute. So she blows them off, or they blow off Miss Minutes. They keep going. We see Mobius shows back up at the TVA, confronts, tries to get things going there. But the important thing there is that Miss Minutes shows up there and gives Ravonna Renslayer a file that is not what she asked for about the creation of the TVA, the creation of time, but a file that is more what he wanted her to have, according to Miss Minutes. And that's a very important aspect of who was he. Now, back with the Citadel, the elevator opens up, and the big reveal of the man behind the curtain is Jonathan Majors, is He Who Remains. Now, I know that you can look online, you'll see probably 100 different people trying to tell you what this episode meant. The important thing to take away from this is that who we met there is He Who Remains. He was once Kang. He was once Immortus. He was once Silver Centurion, Rama Tut, Nathaniel Richards, all of those names. But at that moment, he was He Who Remains. And even though people are, it was Kang, it's very important that there's a differentiation between them. Because when you get, He Who Remains literally is at the end of his life. He's been around so long. Now, Kang starts as Nathaniel Richards from the 31st century. And part of why he always looks so young, even though he's much older, he's just a human. He's just a human from the 31st century. But technology has lengthened his lifespan and his genes, the elasticity of his genes, basically. So where he's supposed to be 70, 80, 90 years old, he still looks like he's in his late 30s, early 40s because of the technology advancements. But he is at the end of his life. He's seen it all. Now, to understand how Kang works, you have to look at Nathaniel Richards. He explains it through, as he tries to explain it to them, he gives a rough idea. And he doesn't throw in the names. And that's that's because I think when you get into the names, it gets too confusing. But you could use the names as a way to differentiate where in the timeline, in his timeline, he is. He starts off as Nathaniel Richards, and that's when he discovers that there is a multiverse. And he contacts others, and they start sharing information, sharing knowledge, and whatnot. And he talks about, the interesting thing is that he talks about how they're complementary. You know, hey, nice hat, nice nose, nice this, nice that. And that's important, and I'll explain why in a minute. But remember that, and every image that we had of him in that little picture show he did, he was always the exact same look. He never changed, even though we had multiple Lokis. We had Richard E. Grant, we have Tom Hiddleston, we have, you know, all these different versions. We have Sophie DiMartino, we have an alligator. The reason is that I think Kang, and according to the comics, Kang is a Nexus being, just like the Scarlet Witch. And we'll get to that in a second, but let me stay with Nathaniel Richards. Nathaniel Richards discovers the multiverse. He's just talking with other Nathaniel Richards from different multiverses. And they end up sharing information, sharing knowledge, technology. But in the comics, what happens is when Nathaniel Richards discovers time travel, he travels back to ancient Egypt, where he's a big fan of, because he's a history nut. And he sets himself up as Pharaoh Rama-Tut. And he lives that life, and he comes across the Fantastic Four, whatnot. And then eventually he comes across Doctor Doom and is so impressed by Doctor Doom, and even thinks that Doom may be a relative of his as well, that he changes his persona and kind of incorporates some of Doom's technology to become Scarlet Centurion. From there, he goes on to become Kang the Conqueror, and as Kang is when he starts fighting the Avengers. And I think Scarlet Centurion does well. I mean, eventually all these guys come across Fantastic Four and Avengers and Defenders and all the different superhero teams. But he's Kang for a while. And then at one point he decides to go back to ancient Egypt and kind of be Rama-Tut again for a while, just because he liked that so much. He ends up back as Kang again. When he becomes older and wiser and starts realizing all the damage he and his variants are doing, and he starts trying to get more control, that's when he becomes Immortus. And as Immortus, he even goes after the Scarlet Witch and the Avengers, because he sees how the Avengers are his true threat. And he's the one that flips Scarlet Witch into a bad guy. Well, in the MCU, the Immortus is basically who we meet in the elevator. That's who Jonathan Majors is playing. But the TVA in the comics created by He Who Remains. So what they've done is they've kind of merged those two characters. Now, He Who Remains doesn't really have a history in the comics. He's just known as being at the end of time, having created first the Time Twisters, which were people in the comics, but they're the devices that go around the neck in Loki. When they fail, he creates the Timekeepers, who then create the TVA. And again, there's 4 Timekeepers. He banishes one. Then we end up with 3. So He Who Remains is who creates the TVA and the Timekeepers. But he doesn't really have a history. There's no, oh, he's this person and this is how he got there. It's just very vague, which means that being able to merge him as like the oldest version of Kang, the most experienced, the end of Kang's line, makes a lot of sense. That he's the extension of Immortus. So you can look at all the different incarnations of Kang as he's grown experience-wise and threat-wise. When he's young and impetuous, he's Rama-Tut. A little more experience, he's Scarlet Centurion. When he's probably his most deadly and most aggressive is when he's Kang the Conqueror. Then when he becomes Immortus, he's the most experienced and he's much more of a strategist and he's more playing the long game. And then He Who Remains, he's done it all. He's tired. He wants to just wrap it up and he wants to give his chocolate factory over to someone else. Except I don't think he does. I think that's part of the act. He talks about how he's paved the way for them to get there. I think that, have you ever heard the term bootstrap paradox? Bootstrap paradox is the idea that Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, they need the car keys so they can take the car and go where they need to go. So Bill tells Ted, when we get back, use the time machine to put the keys outside in the garden so we can then take the keys and go where we need to go. Sure enough, the keys are there. That's a bootstrap paradox. They're basically creating something based on the fact that it'll happen later. There was no free thing that put the keys there. The keys just didn't happen to be there. They made it there by time travel. I think that we see that Kang is using a script and he knows up to a certain point what's happening. There's a chance that he's seen the end of time and that's just as far as he's seen. That is one possibility. But another possibility is that when he dies, Sylvie sort of takes over a little bit and eventually meets the new Kang or the new person who's going to control the timeline. And in doing so, tells him what happens, gives him the script of what they said during their conversation. So he had the script because they acted it out, and Sylvie remembered it and then told him, which gave him the script. Bootstrap paradox are really bad in the brain. I'm sorry, Kyle. But there's a good possibility that's what happened. Now, Kang's got a few other personas, but they're all like variants, like Victor Timely. I believe there's also Victor Timely Jr. and Victor Timely III. There's the Lord of the Seven Sons, I believe it is. There's also Kid Immortus and Iron Lad. And Iron Lad and maybe Kid Immortus are created because Kang decided to mess in his own timeline. Iron Lad specifically, he goes back to stop somebody from bullying him. And in doing so, he caused the bully to actually stab his younger self. And then when he saves his younger self, shows him what his future is like, the younger self rebels and ends up going to hide in our modern time, looking for the Avengers to protect him. And it turns out the Avengers have disbanded. He finds Vision, a version of Vision that he could reboot. And Vision has this protocol to create a new team of Avengers, which is basically the Young Avengers. So, and I know that there's been a lot of talk about them building to the Young Avengers. So Kang is possibly part of that team as well, which is something we'll probably deal with in the future. Now I'm starting to get a headache too. Now, the Nexus Beam thing is important because we learned what a Nexus Beam is sort of in WandaVision. They referred to Wanda as being a Nexus Beam. And in the comics, both Scarlet Witch and Kang are Nexus Beings, along with a few others, but none of them have really been introduced. They're either characters that we haven't met yet, or they're very specific characters from a specific multiverse, which doesn't make a lot of sense because Nexus Beings are supposed to be consistent across all timelines. At least that's how it was originally described. So where you could have multi-versions of Loki by different actors, you should always have Elizabeth Olsen as Scarlet Witch. You should always have Jonathan Majors as Kang or any other variation of Kang across all the multiverses. So the Nexus beings are consistent across all multiverses, and their powers are consistent too. So that there's a good chance that's going to play a part in the Doctor Strange movie. Now, so basically we've got this event happening at the Citadel of Time, and He Who Remains knows what's going on. He's got a good feel of it because he's got the script, but then there's a point where it goes off script. He doesn't know what's going to happen. And it's probably the first time in a long time that he doesn't know what's going to happen. It's not all written for him, which is probably why he is so giddy and beside himself. Why the character is so over the top and seemingly crazy. It's because he's been alone. He's been living off of a script for all these years. He's constantly pairing timelines and eliminating variants and trying to control things to keep the sacred timeline together. He's exhausted. He's done. He's mentally fried. He's probably lost his mind. And now he's near the end, and he's interacting with these two who have gotten all the way there. Maybe others got close, and whether it was the void that destroyed them or Miss Minutes offering them something is what kept them from going all the way. It looks like these are the first two to actually get that far. And he's not sure what's going to happen. He doesn't know what their answer is going to be. And when Sophie makes the choice, it changes everything. That's when it goes off the script. It's not when she attacks him. She's already made the decision. When he starts talking about, there it is, we just passed the threshold. That happens a little bit beforehand, before they even get out of the chairs. Because at that point, she's already made the decision that she's going to kill him. And there's nothing he can do at that point. It's just going to play out how it's going to play out. Which, for him, it's exciting because he's probably done. He's very tired. He doesn't want to do this anymore. He's probably feeling like Kyle is right now, sitting on his couch at home going, I'm tired of this. I don't want to do this anymore. Let someone else come in and take over. That's what He Who Remains feels like. And again, not calling him Kang because he's not Kang at this point. I don't think Kang would be as ethereal and crazy and whatnot. He says he's back on bootstraps. Kyle says he's back on bootstraps. Still trying to figure out the bootstrap paradox, huh? So that's where this whole thing builds up. Now, the show, the fact that we don't get a resolution to all of that makes sense because this is setup. This is changing the MCU completely. This season was about Loki and going from being the selfish, backstabbing, conniving, untrustworthy person that we see in Avengers Tower to the guy that's willingly standing in front of a swinging sword to stop what he thinks is going to hurt a lot of people that could cause multiversal war. This whole season has been about Loki's growth. How Loki isn't, gets to the point where he's not alone anymore. And he finds out at the end, even with all his change, he's still alone. Sophie turns on him. And when he gets back to the TVA, Mobius doesn't even remember him. They don't even know that he's a Loki. He can walk through all the hunters who have been looking for him without a second thought. He's just another analyst. That's the arc of the first season. It wasn't about wrapping up the story of the TVA and stuff like that. This was just about that. Now, there's some people that think the TVA shouldn't have changed because it exists outside of the timeline. And where, yeah, that's mostly true, what you have to remember is that it still had to be created. And at some point, someone came off the timeline and took over that spot and created the TVA. And remember, time is a circle. We saw it. It's Matthew McConaughey's flat circle from True Detective. And from the Citadel, you could see the beginning and the end. It's a constant loop. That's why in the opening credits, we got to see, or we got to hear all of those moments because we were traveling through the loop. We got to hear Steve Rogers say, I could do this all day, and then answer himself, yeah, I know. We got to hear Wakanda Forever and all of these other things. And we also got to hear some real world stuff like Greta Thunberg. We got to hear Nelson Mandela, Maya Angelou, all of those things. We got to hear Neil Armstrong. These are all major events that we were listening to as we were traveling through the time loop. What happens, though, when Sylvie kills He Who Remains, it resets time. This is the end of time, and the loop starts over at the beginning, and she's taken He Who Remains out of the loop, controlling it, which allows a different variation of Nathaniel Richards to step up, to take over, which means that a different version of Nathaniel Richards started the TVA, where the one that took over originally thought that having figureheads and the 3 different timekeepers, things like that, was necessary, and to keep all the doctrine and all that. The new one looks like he's kind of controlling more with an iron fist. And that is Kang. And we can tell it's Kang because of the statue at the end. We see a statue of Jonathan Majors, but he's in pretty close to comic accurate Kang uniform, Kang's armor, where the He Who Remains was wearing pretty much comic accurate Immortus gear. So you could tell the difference between the two just by what they were wearing. One in the elevator and in the office, the other on the statue. So when Loki goes back, it's not that he's gone to a different multiverse or because the TVA exists outside of time. It's that in the timeline, someone else, a different variant, has created the TVA. What's important is different. So there's a good chance that Lokis haven't been hunted and pruned, and they're wanting these variants. That's what they're talking about. Was it B-15 and Mobius are talking about, well, what are we supposed to do? Well, he wants them to continue. He doesn't want us to stop them. So the TVA he returns to is not one he's been to before. Because when everything started up again, when the loop started, he wasn't part of it. He was coming out of time. It probably started the moment she made the choice. Not necessarily when she killed him, but when she made the choice. That choice was the starter point of rebuilding time, or the beginning of time again. So that's why he comes back. And he remembers everybody, but no one else does, because he was at the Citadel when time started over, and a different Kang, or Kang instead of Immortus or He Who Remains, started the TVA. All right, we're going to pause there. Let Kyle take a break and try to figure out and see if he has any questions when we come back from the commercial. So let's pop into a commercial real quick, and we'll pick it up right after.
To be continued. 3 little words that hold the secret to the next great story. 3 words that will thrill you, confound you, give life to new possibilities. Every variation of To Be Continued is a promise of adventure, a promise of excitement, a promise of unseen wonders and unexplored worlds. A promise that every issue you read makes you a part of a never-ending journey, and behind every page there will be an unopened door waiting for you. This story to be continued at your local comic book shop today. Visit comicshoplocator.com today.
All right, everybody, we're back, and we're doing a deep dive into the Loki season finale and what it's going to mean for the MCU, what season 2 might be, and everything else. But let's go ahead and roll that spoiler warning just in case. And before we continue, Kyle, how you doing? You following along? You got any questions?
Well, I like this. I really like the theory you went to break on. That it is the beginning of another time loop.
Mm-hmm.
Because the whole concept of the multiverse exists on the idea that there are multiple time loops. I still don't know how we get. I still don't know how we get from there to what will become the multiversal war.
The multiversal war, he explains it in that once they realize that there are multiverses and they start traveling, then there are people who decide they want to conquer those new ones.
Sure. But what I'm saying is I'm going back through my Rolodex of comics going, okay, where does this story take place? And I'm having a hard time believing we can get there without Galactus.
Well, they did they did the Infinity Gauntlet story or the Infinity War without Mephisto.
Yeah, and you've heard me rant and rave about it.
Yes.
How angry it made me. So I have a hard time believing we can get there without Galactus.
Mm-hmm. We may never actually get to the multiverse war.
That's true. I see. I would like to think that that's phase. What are we in now? Phase 5?
Phase 4.
So that's phase 6 or 7.
It's possible.
You know, you have hundreds of what if stories
mm-hmm.
that could all literally be alternate timelines, alternate branches of the timeline. So you can have this experiment where you're figuring out which of those makes sense in terms of movies we can make and shows we can make.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you know, a couple of phases later, you've got your Fantastic Four, you've got your X-Men, you've got your characters. Now you're going to bring them back in together and have the multiversal war.
Yes. Well, first thing is you got to keep in mind that there is a possibility that the Fantastic Four movie is the multiversal war.
Well, and that would tie a lot together because you have Franklin Richards ties to Wonder Woman through Agatha Harkness. You've got Nathaniel Richards' ties to Loki through Kang.
Uh-huh.
You've got Silver Surfer, which will eventually hook up with Captain Marvel.
Yep. Each phase has ended with a big movie. Phase 3 had one extra movie with Spider-Man Far From Home, but basically Avengers Infinity War and Endgame were the big ending. Avengers, Age of Ultron, Avengers Infinity War. So Phase 4 appears to be ending with the Fantastic Four. So it could be that Multiverse of Madness may actually pare down the number of multiverses so it's something more manageable. And then we'll get things like we'll deal with Kang some more in Ant-Man and the Wasp. He may pop up in some other little movies, and then the big thing will be Fantastic Four. Now, that could be the end of Kang, or that could, Kang could be Phase 4, Phase 5, Phase 6, but I don't think they're going to do that. I think Kang will be Phase 4, leading to Fantastic Four. Then we'll get something bigger. Maybe that's when they start putting the Dark Avengers type team, and we go a different direction. Because I don't know how much they want to stay with time travel.
Yeah, I could see that. But my feeling, though, is if you do if Fantastic Four really is the end, and it looks like it is the end of this phase, and the Fantastic Four is the multiversal war, and you are going to pare down the multiverse and Multiverse of Madness, I think we have to start immediately seeing characters come into the MCU that we have no casting information on. We've not heard word one about. I mean, we've got to start seeing Doctor Doom. We've got to start seeing Miles Morales. We've got to start seeing some of these guys that exist in the broader multiverse.
Well,
start to show up, because if you're going to do a multiversal war story without those characters, you're only going to be telling a part of the story. So maybe that's how they do it, is they tell a part of the multiversal war in Fantastic Four. Then later on, they tell another part and another part, almost like it's Star Wars in that way, where you've got your three different kind of phases of Star Wars.
Yeah, but you could also look at this like Crisis on Infinite Earths. Okay.
I'd rather not. I mean, we're already in such a confusing situation to tie in Crisis.
Not so much the event, but the aftermath. If they use it as a Crisis level thing, where I actually did a little rant on this, so let me. This gives Kevin Feige and the crew the opportunity to reshape everything in the main timeline. This is where they could, and I'm saying could, not will, but could, they could bring in the Fantastic Four and recast X-Men. They could pick and choose from the Netflix series, because we know he likes Charlie Cox as Daredevil, Vincent D'Onofrio as Kingpin, Kristen Ritter as Jessica Jones, and John Bernthal as Punisher. He could bring them in and leave Luke Cage and Iron Fist out. He can pick and choose from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., Agent Carter, Runaways, all of that stuff. Or he could ignore it. And what that does is basically a Phase 4 creates this malleable timeline setup where we don't have to establish everything. We just have to establish that the change is possible. So Spider-Man Far From Home, or No Way Home, gives us different Spider-Men. We get Doc Ock and Electro for sure. Maybe we get the other two Spider-Mans, maybe not. But what it does is it creates the idea that these Doctor Strange will do it too. Maybe we get Tom Cruise popping up as Iron Man, or we get DiCaprio popping up as Spider-Man, or whatever weirdness they want to do.
Well, so that's something I was talking to a friend of mine about this earlier, and it occurred to me that what they've done from a business standpoint is absolutely genius.
Yeah.
Because they can use the films and shows that spin out of this to burn off some of these big high dollar contracts with these huge megastars, that could potentially in 4 or 5 years be holding them back. If you've got to pay Chris Hemsworth $100 million to still be playing Thor in 5 years, that's a hindrance to telling other stories.
Right. But these guys, Robert Downey Jr. started asking for the big bucks.
Right.
But you haven't really heard of these other people asking for the big bucks.
If you burn up if you get through the contract, so you have it as 7 movies, $100 million or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now you've done your 7 movies. You've got your money. Do you want to keep playing Thor? Well, we'll do it on a $10,000 a movie basis.
Yes.
But you might only be in one scene. We'll shoot you out in one day kind of thing. So these people who have gone on to become huge stars can cameo and leave.
Yep. And they can do things like give us a new Captain America with Wyatt Russell. They can give us a new Black Widow with Yelena Belova. They can make these swaps out. But with this allows them to bring in the Fox characters. They can bring in Ryan Reynolds as Deadpool, who is going to keep playing Deadpool as long as they let him. And if they tell him we can only give you this amount of money, he'll probably say yes because he loves the character. Tom Hiddleston.
You don't even have to give me that. I'll fund it out of my own pocket.
Yeah. Tom Hiddleston just said today that he'll play Loki for the rest of his life if they let him.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Chris Hemsworth has that same attitude. Chris Evans, they're already talking about having him coming back for some contracts, but his main thing is he wants to direct and do smaller movies. So they don't use him as much. Every once in a while he pops up. He's an old guy on the moon, whatever. Robert Downey Jr. does a cameo if they've already killed him, but they can still cameo. They have the ability to do that, but what this does is it also allows them to fix little things if they want to. Things that didn't, that when they started and they just had Iron Man and, a Hulk, and they didn't know if it was ever going to take off. Well, now they can explain why James Rhodes looks like Don Cheadle instead of Terrence Howard. They can explain why Hulk is now Mark Ruffalo instead of Ed Norton. Why does the Abomination suddenly have the wings on his head? Well, maybe he continued to mutate, or maybe that's just how he looks now because of the timeline reset.
Right? I mean, I think those are great kind of ideas. I think I'm so much of my thought on this is wrapped up in this idea that we're building toward a more universally understood Marvel Universe.
It could be. But
at the same time, we just got through the first property they've done that I personally don't feel like they spoon-fed the normies.
Yeah.
Finally, we had a show where you and I had to have deep talks about, okay, now who was this and what was that? And okay, if that was this, then that means this other thing has to be true.
Yep.
Which only happens to people like us.
Mm-hmm.
So they've finally given us this thing. And if they're moving in a direction where it's more universally understood, where there's stuff for the normals, and then there's stuff for us, why not just blow it all up? Which I think is really a strong possibility in Multiverse of Madness.
Well, first thing you got to keep in mind is you're right. This is the first one they didn't spoon feed the norms. And you could tell the difference between WandaVision and this. Because in WandaVision, all of the comic readers, all the people who have Marvel lore in their minds, were like, it's got to be Mephisto. Because in the comics, it was Mephisto. There was a lot set up. Agatha Harkness worked for Mephisto in the comics. Everything screamed Mephisto to the people in the know. But the simplest storyline was to not introduce Mephisto at all and make it Agatha all along. It made the most sense from a storytelling point of view. Going into Loki, it made the most sense, and this was my prediction on Tuesday, is that the person in the castle was going to be Richard E. Grant. He was a variant Loki who was, basically was tired out. All of the stuff that He Who Remains was, but that it was a variant Loki, because introducing the idea of Kang and all his different personalities and stuff like that, and how once you introduce Kang, once you put him physically on the screen, all bets are off. He's now the big bad. But if you keep him, just do a little cameo in the background like a statue, and you give us this tamed version, this silly version, what you do is that you bring in the comic history. You bring in He Who Remains, and you introduce the idea that Kang is all these different versions. So you don't spoon feed it. So you do the same ending that I was predicting, but the difference is that you go ahead and give the more complicated thing that they've been building to, and all the readers were like, oh no, it's Kang, it's Kang, it's Kang. And they actually went with Kang instead of the normie. And that's the only difference. Had they wanted to keep it for the norms, they would have just made it Richie Grant.
But, and here's where I'm going, and this is what I was really getting at, is that in Multiverse of Madness, they could just straight up put all of the multiverses on Front Street. So now it's okay, this is the 616 universe for you normals.
Mm-hmm.
But for those of us that are a little more in the know, here's the Ultimate Universe.
Absolutely.
You're going to see Ultimate Spider-Man movies. And just know that it's going to be deeper. And I think that having that opportunity is something that didn't exist prior to Wednesday. And that's kind of where I'm going with it, is that
the problem with that is that we're not talking about comics. We're not talking about 80 books a month that they're putting out, or whatever number Marvel puts out. They're finite. I mean, this year alone is amazing because we're getting Black Widow, Shang-Chi, The Eternals, Spider-Man, and like 5 Disney Plus series. But that's still only a handful of things compared to how many comics you could play like that. What I think they're more likely to do is use No Way Home, Multiverse of Madness, and What If to establish that there are all of these parallel worlds out there, all these multiverses. And we'll get little hints at them here and there, but just put in the viewer's mind that they're this infinite, or they put the number 63 out there, but if there's however many number out there, and then if it wraps up in Fantastic Four, then they can introduce anything afterwards and say, well, this came from this other universe. That's why it's different. They don't necessarily have to establish it beforehand. So they don't have to establish Miles Morales now. They can just later on say, he came out of the multiverse. You just make it a possibility that people accept. And once you've got that, you don't need to explain it anymore. But you also don't have to spend all that time creating every little nuance. You don't have to show all these things in this one phase.
But with the viability of Disney Plus as a delivery mechanism, now all of a sudden you don't have to make movies and TV shows. You can make animated series.
True, but people don't watch the animated series nearly as much as they watch the live action.
I 100% agree.
Mm-hmm.
But what I'm getting at is it's if they told you and I, hey, they're gonna get really into the weeds on the Kree Skrull War, but it's gonna be in an animated series, we'd still watch it.
Oh yeah.
And that's what I'm saying is that we don't have to have the big set point. We don't have to take the big set points and move where they're at. Those can stay where they are for the normal people. But now that they've built a mechanism to give us the kind of content that we love, because it lets us have these kind of conversations.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to matter if they put it in an animated series or in a web comic or in a, on YouTube. We'll go find it and we'll partake.
Yeah.
So I think what I'm really getting at is for the first time ever, I have hope that the Marvel Universe will give me something that isn't pandery.
Yeah, and I think that's what Disney Plus will do. That's why we get stuff like The Secret or What If. I think What If is going to be for the fans, for the comic fans. But I think the movies, they're always going to make the movies with the idea that you can watch whatever movie you want and the big ending one for each phase. Mm-hmm. You need to watch Avengers. You need to watch, and you'll probably need to watch Fantastic Four, because I think that Fantastic Four is going to play the part of the Avengers in this phase.
Sure.
So that's my instinct. But also, I mean, it's like Doctor Strange. There's only so much they can count on people seeing Doctor Strange because he's not as popular of a hero as, say, Iron Man was. But also, they're going in more of a horror direction. And as soon as you take a horror direction, you limit your audience, even by a little. And if you're thinking that maybe it's not that, there's a quote today from Screen Rant. Elizabeth Olsen was in an interview, and the interviewer prodded her for details about Doctor Strange. And all she says is, it's a very scary movie. It's like old Sam Raimi. They're trying to create the scariest Marvel movie ever. So, sure. Yes, and that's great because...
And that's why you bring Sam Raimi in to make that movie.
Absolutely. And Marvel succeeds because all of these movies aren't cookie cutter. They're not... I mean, you get Ant-Man and the Wasp is usually a heist movie. So Iron Man is more of a sci-fi movie or a tech-based movie. Guardians of the Galaxy is Marvel's version of Star Wars. You get all these different genres. They don't do, we got a war film. We get all these different things. Well,
but and this is what I'll say to that end. When Iron Man came out, Iron Man was selling what Doctor Strange was selling 5 years later.
Yes.
The numbers weren't there. Iron Man was not their big book when Iron Man came out. It became their big book. We've seen every one of these movies bolster and boost the book.
Yeah, but I'm not talking about the book. I'm talking about...
No. So here's what I'm getting at. If they're going that direction with Doctor Strange, the horror direction, right? They're doing what you're talking about doing. We can start looking at it and saying, okay, if this is where they're going, these are the movies for me as a fan.
Yes.
So I didn't like any of the Thor movies. Any of them.
Okay.
Because I don't really care for high fantasy.
All right.
I love Guardians of the Galaxy because I like camp comedy.
Now, see, I thought you'd like Ragnarok because to me that felt more like Guardians of the Galaxy.
That one made me angry for a whole bunch of different reasons.
Okay. Yeah, I know. Because they called it Ragnarok.
I would have liked it if they had just called it the next Thor movie Or Thor 3, Electric Boogaloo.
Yes.
You know? Thor 3, he's my friend from work. Like, you know, like I would have been fine with it. But now I can start to say, you know what? I want to go see the Doctor Strange movie, and I can watch all of these shows and see the last movie in the line, and I'm going to know what's happening.
Yeah.
And that, to me, also is a very interesting concept. It's never been a thing that any of these studios have ever done where you don't have to see every one of their films.
Yeah.
They're setting it up that you can go follow the characters you like rather than following everything.
Yep. But we still have to kind of figure out how this is going to affect all these other movies. Is the reason we haven't seen the Eternals before now because they didn't exist in our timeline until now?
But the Eternals have But what that's essentially saying is that things like Eternals and things like Celestials and these kind of things that are, I'm going to use the word taken for granted, but that's not what I mean.
Okay.
These things that are everywhere and always in the Marvel Universe aren't. Because the Eternals are of that level, right? They've been here since the beginning.
But we know the Celestials exist in the timeline.
Right. But is that saying that we haven't seen other Celestials because these are the only ones that exist in this timeline?
That's the thing that suddenly those are the type of questions that are suddenly now
right. And the thing that the problem is that it's the Eternals have been here since the beginning of time. Well, which beginning?
Exactly. Beginning of the new time.
Oh, I want to slap Kevin Feige so bad.
I'm telling you, this really opens up so many questions because you basically restarted time and everything could have changed.
Can you see, is there steam or smoke coming out of my ears at this point?
Yes.
Because my brain is starting to really chug.
Yeah. I mean, you can go all the way back to Iron Man and go, well, why did, because the question I've always had is, why did Obadiah Stane want Tony Stark dead in the first place? Why did they capture him? And because he made the deal to have them kill him. So why?
Because his last name was Stane?
Yeah.
I think that's probably it, because bad writing.
Stane.
Still.
It's what he was in the comics.
I know.
But
there's a local politician here whose last name is Stainbrook. And everybody used to call him Stain. And he hated it. And then he left politics and started a band called The Stain. And at one point he sued the band Stained for copyright infringement. So I just assume anyone whose last name includes that syllable is a bad person.
Sean Butler asked, do you feel the way Loki has done things, they might try to somehow bring certain characters that were killed off back? Okay. They absolutely could. We could get Quicksilver back in the MCU. We could bring back Tony Stark. All of those things are now on the table. Will they? That we can't say if they will or they won't. But the potential is there. The potential is there to bring back any character and introduce any character now.
Oh, man. So my big gripe with Black Panther was that they took his biggest bad guy and killed him off like he was nothing in that movie in order to make the Killmonger story go over. Claw is the big bad guy in Black Panther.
They could absolutely bring back Claw.
Having that possibility completely changes the way you watch that movie.
You know what's another possibility? One of the what ifs has T'Challa being taken off into space and Killmonger saving Tony Stark in Afghanistan. So maybe it's possible that Killmonger could become the new Black Panther. He doesn't die at the end, and he's the new Black Panther since T'Challa has passed away, or Chadwick Boseman. So Eric B. Jordan could become the new Black Panther.
Michael B. Jordan, excuse
me. He was Eric Killmonger.
I would hate to see that happen. Because I think a lot of people would be gravely offended by that.
But they wouldn't make him T'Challa. They would just make him the Black Panther.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It's not T'Challa. There's a lot of opportunity now.
Yep.
Oh.
They could write in a brother.
If you put that mantle on anyone else. But there are other stories where the person who would the role traditionally filled by the Black Panther is played by someone else with a different name. Like, yeah, Sean Butler says, at one point Shuri becomes the Black Panther.
Yes.
You could make a case for that. Mm-hmm. But I mean, it changes the way, knowing what you know now at the end of Loki, if you go back and you rewatch every Marvel movie, I would bet dollars to donuts that it changes the viewing of at least a third of them.
I'm going to mess with your mind one more time here. We don't know when. So this is possible that it could have already affected movies we've already seen. For example, Black Widow. When Alexei is in prison.
Go ahead.
It's not a spoiler. There's a scene where Alexei talks about having fought Captain America, but it's at a time when Captain America was in the ice. Maybe it wasn't.
You know that screen that happens at the end of Donkey Kong where it just says game over?
Uh-huh.
That's in my brain right now.
Yep.
Bit and all.
Oh, yeah. The potential here is insane. This is literally like Crisis on Infinite Earths in that when DC got to basically do whatever they wanted with these characters again. You know, they could set new rules. They've just recreated the timeline. How Marvel uses it, that remains to be seen. But that is the potential of what just happened. Oh. Now, they could absolutely do very little with it, just connect a few dots, bring some characters in from, bring Deadpool into the universe, set up the X-Men and the Fantastic Four and be done with it so that fans don't start doing like you do.
How much would you love if what we were watching this whole time wasn't linear in that sense, where it's some of the things are from post-Loki and some of the things are pre-Loki, and now we've got to have like Marvel BL and Marvel AL, like it's BC and AD, like
yep.
I would love that. As much as it would frustrate the hell out of me. Mm-hmm. It would make movies I didn't like better. And that's a great gift, I'll be honest. Like, I'm Oh,
Yeah, Sean, I agree with you. I have actually stopped watching the CW shows, not on purpose. But ever since I literally have not watched. I think I watched the rest of that season of Black Lightning. Haven't watched anything else since. I haven't watched any of the new Superman. It just
I stopped watching right at the beginning of Crisis in the CW verse, and haven't been able. Part of that is because I was watching it on Netflix, and that was kind of the end of the season.
yeah.
And I haven't started over, but I think Crisis is one of those things that for me, and why Nick and I are friends, is that we both love Crisis. If you mess it up even a little bit, you mess it up even just a little bit,
Yeah.
they're dead to me.
Yep.
So, but we've gone long, Dan.
I know. But we're the last show of the night, so
Right?
yeah.
True.
And Sean had some questions. We couldn't leave without answering Sean's questions.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. He just got here.
Right. It's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, Sean, Flash without Sherlock is not something I'm interested in.
Yeah, I don't know about the next season without Cisco, without Sherlock. Yeah.
So, well, I think this is I'll say one more thing on Loki. Now that it's all out, I want to binge it. Because I think something that happened, to me at least, is that this week between things is great because it gives us all this time to speculate and research and read.
Yeah.
But it also clouds the storyline in my brain, at least, because I'm bringing in all this other information.
That's
So
why you're
watch
supposed to rewatch the last episode before you watch the new one.
Right. Which I do, but like I want to watch it in one long stream of consciousness.
Yeah.
You know, maybe take naps in between a couple of them, but like, well, because there are some of them where your brain just needs that minute to heal.
Mhm.
But watch it in one long stream of consciousness and really kind of follow the plot points again. So,
Yep. By the way, here's a neat fun thing that if you don't pay attention, in the final episode, we haven't seen Casey in a while. The guy with the little cart with all the gemstones in it.
yes.
That actor, Eugene Cordero, is credited as being one of the hunters when he goes back. So in this new timeline, Casey is now a hunter. He's got a letter and a number
for him.
designation. He got promoted. And that means that's good, you know. So
Yes.
somebody has moved up in the new timeline.
He earned it.
He did. He did.
So,
He was my favorite character until they introduced Alligator Loki.
Loki, I believe is the name.
Nope, Alligator Loki. It's not
like
it's
Baby
not
Yoda.
Alla Loki. It's not Crocky or Croaky. It's Alligator Loki.
Croca Loki?
Somebody made the most bizarre Easter egg connection. I guess there was some Disney animated thing where Tom Hiddleston played Captain Hook.
Yes.
Okay, so in this, an alligator bites off Loki's right hand.
Speaking of Captain Hook, check out Never Never from in comic stores this week. Got to bring it all back around.
That's right, and Grim Fairy Tales number 50.
Yes. All right. Dan, it's your show. I'll let you wrap up when you're ready. But
Sean, did we
I
get all
really-
your questions answered?
I just want to tell you, I really have appreciated you kind of guiding us through Loki. I told you when we started talking about doing this show that I thought it was going to be needed.
Yeah.
And if no one else needed it, I certainly did.
Well, I am happy to be the guidepost for you guys. It's a lot of fun, and I enjoy doing it. So we'll have to see what comes with What If and the shows after that. You know, Hawkeye, Miss Marvel, Book of Boba Fett. Should be a lot of fun.
Oh, so excited for the Book of Boba Fett.
Me too.
They're changing the name of his ship to
Yes.
Boba Fett's Starship, which I think is just a worse version of Jefferson's Starship.
Rebuilt
and-
the city.
What I really want is for somebody to say, "Oh, what happened to the Slave One?" And he goes, "Why do people call it that? That's never been its name." He's just like gives it a new name because he's an old grumpy old man. And he's like, "I'm tired of this."
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Sean, the ending of Black Widow made me really excited for Hawkeye. So somebody hasn't seen it yet, but
I don't want to buy it on Disney Plus. I want to go back to the movie theaters and see it.
okay.
Because if I buy it on Disney Plus and fall asleep, I'll be real angry.
If you buy it on Disney Plus, fall asleep, you start it over. You have it for a month.
I'm gonna be real angry. I'd much rather go. That was the thing, is I decided that was the movie that was going to be my get back in the movie theaters movie.
Yeah.
And then I had this stupid surgery and can't go back to the movie theater. So I find myself in a quandary.
It was going to be mine as well, but then I had gotten home from vacation. We were both tired. It's like laying on the bed. Hey, let's just watch it.
Yeah.
So
Also, I'm not sure. Well, I'll figure that part out. But maybe I'll watch it this weekend. Maybe I won't. Maybe I'll just hate it on spec.
well, there's no source material, so you don't have to hate it for that reason.
Maybe I'll just hate it because it's not called Red Guardian and he's the best.
Red Guardian is awesome in the movie.
That's the only. I've been excited for Red Guardian since they announced David Harbour as Red Guardian.
If somebody was to send me a Red Guardian helmet, I would wear it through an entire episode of the show.
I have the Funko Pops.
I do too. I've got them right over there.
Mm-hmm.
I have the Red Guardian. I have Taskmaster and Natasha. I don't care about
I
you.
only have Red Guardian. It's the only one I care about.
Yeah, and I've got Zemo, Falcon, and Winter Soldier there, and I've got a Loki there, but from Ragnarok. So,
I just picked up the gay Stormtrooper.
thank you, Sean.
Yeah, the Pride Stormtrooper. That's my newest Funko Pop.
Oh, nice. Is he in rainbow or?
Yeah, he's a rainbow Stormtrooper.
Nice.
Pride Month Stormtrooper. I love it. It's a great pop.
Yeah, they have an alligator Loki pop now. That I'm tempted.
All right, I'm going shopping.
I think it's a Hot Toys exclusive. So you should start on their site.
Alligator Loki Funko Pop.
Mm-hmm.
Big Apple Collectibles has it.
Okay.
Oh, it's goofy. Hold on. Share screen.
Cherry Slurpee from 7-Eleven is my newest pop. That's cool. I always preferred the Cola Slurpee, but... Oh, he looks cool.
Right. No, I love it. It's so goofy.
Yeah. That is awesome. See? Alligator Loki.
All right.
All right, guys. We're going to wrap up the show there. Sean, thanks for joining us. Kyle, thanks for hopping on. And I hope I give you guys a little solace in your Loki brains. And next week, I'm going to try to book some guests. So we have some interviews. I got one lined up for Tuesday. An old friend of mine who's a cosplayer named AZ Power Girl. She's going to come on Tuesday. I'm going to see what I can do for the rest of the week because we don't have Loki to talk about. So,
and who knows? I might be able to get you a couple of guests too. I was emailing some people today.
I would love that. So
we will talk.
Got a couple names too, but let's figure it out.
And Dan and I are back Tuesday night where we talk about comics that are in stores this week on a show called In Stores This Week.
That's right. And don't forget, Saturday at some time, they're going to rerun Pop Go the Writers with we don't have a guest, but it's Paul Story and I talking about the Loki finale.
Aren't you talking about episode 5? Because we're a week behind.
Oh.
Because you record the episode about the Loki finale on Sunday?
Yeah, we just recorded it.
But the Loki finale just came out on Wednesday.
You're right, episode 5. We'll be talking about episode 5. Sunday night, I'll be recording. Sunday night, I'll be doing the season finale with Paul Story and my former, the Rosalinda Diaz, the writer who did the WandaVision with me. She's coming back for the finale of Loki.
I will say that all this confusion, Kang's fault.
Absolutely. It's all a new timeline. By the way, the pop is on the Dropbox for you to grab.
All right, thanks, sir.
All right. Good night, everybody. Have a great night, and we'll see you soon. Bye.